You know their crimes, and you've heard from their victims, and you've had a glimpse into their mind. But do you really want to know what would make someone snap? Do you wonder how someone becomes a cold-blooded killer? Is the psyche of a serial killer all that different from yours? Perhaps you may even know someone with a proclivity towards evil. We're about to dive deep into the heart of what makes people tick. Is it nature or is it nurture? You decide. Welcome to the Let's Be Frank podcast, where we are talking about all things true crime related. I am the serial author, Franklin James, and this is my co-host,
Frankie.
Right. And I think that we're a couple of true crime enthusiasts, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we want to look into the heart of what makes people tick, right? We want to understand why people do what they do without remorse, right? And then there's that age-old question, are serial killers born or are they formed?
Right.
So we're going to be examining a bunch of different cases, old and new, kind of coming at it from different angles. And so we can better understand what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, what is going on?
But we do want to caution you because we are going to talk about some things that are pretty gruesome. We're going to go in grave detail, and a lot of it's not for the faint of heart. So,
It was difficult to research it, so I can imagine it's probably going to be just as difficult to listen to.
It's
but
pretty crazy.
Incredibly interesting, so.
Yeah, buckle the fuck up.
You're in for a ride.
We're going to be frank.
We are going to be frank.
About Albert Fish.
The Brooklyn Vampire.
The Brooklyn Vampire, the werewolf of Wisteria. What else is there?
Gray Man.
The Gray Man.
In fact, the horror movie after him, I think.
That's true.
Called The Gray Man. Yeah.
I think one kid even called him the Boogeyman.
The Boogeyman. Yeah.
I don't have the terms in front of me.
And even that may have been too kind.
Yeah, that was definitely pretty tame.
Given what people are about to find out.
Yeah. So, a lot of people may already know about Albert Fish.
Yeah.
Right? Just his whole thing. We'll give you guys just like a brief summary about what's going on with him. What's going on with good old Al.
Good old Al.
But as far as our podcast, I kind of wanted to tackle him in regards to how the FBI profiles and comes up with their plan of identifying a suspect, what they do, how they look at means, motive, and opportunity. And I want to apply that to Mr. Fish here. I want to talk about how that would apply to him. Because obviously when he was going on, it was back in
Depression era.
The Depression era. So, I want to apply those principles.
As if people weren't under enough stress.
Right. Now they got to worry about.
Now we got this guy roaming
the streets and, doing what we know he was doing.
Right.
But Albert Fish. Born 1870, Washington, D.C., 2 parents. One of them was 75.
Yeah. And perhaps that had something to do with it.
It might have.
Who knows?
It might have. 75-year-old dad, which is like...
Randall.
Yeah, Randall. What was his occupation? Wasn't he something...
I don't know what dad was.
I think he was like a boat captain, if I remember. He did some stuff like that.
Something that would seem a little bit out of the ordinary today, but I think was more common in that time period.
Yeah. Most definitely.
And his mother was Ellen, and she was a homemaker, right?
Yes, I believe she was a homemaker. Yeah. Father dies when he's 5. By the way, his family is just plagued with mental illness.
I was gonna say, this was a sick, and not to make light, obviously, of mental illness, but this really came, as no surprise that there would be something in his bloodline that at least contributed to some extent, if not more. So what kind of mental illnesses did run in his family?
So I believe his uncle was classified as having mania, which I'm pretty sure today would be some form of bipolarism, I believe. He had a brother who was also institutionalized. I don't remember if that was for, they didn't really have the term schizophrenia then, but I can't remember if he had hallucinations or if he was delusional.
He may have. I know his mother did.
Right.
And she would probably have been assuming probably diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Oh, she most
Today.
definitely would have.
Yeah.
Been. Yeah. Yeah, so she visual and auditory hallucinations. His mother, his sister. I also believe they said she had a mental affliction. I believe
Right,
is what
whatever
they call whatever
that
you
meant,
want to.
but she definitely she struggled.
Whatever you want to call
Yeah.
that. So yeah, family
And various
plagues
other relatives that
correct ran in his family.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, born 1870, executed 1936. During that time frame, he had many different labels.
And he impacted the lives of hundreds.
Oh, yeah, like hundreds. Vampirist, serial killer, obviously, serial rapist, pedophile, cannibal,
sadist,
abductor. I mean, there was like a ton of paraphilias
associated with him, yeah.
Just a ton of them associated with him.
But also a house painter. So,
which I did find out would be classified as a skilled position.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So that would make
because he was very organized too.
Correct. But he displayed. We'll get into that.
We will. I don't mean to jump ahead.
No, you're fine because it's fine. But yeah, so needless to say, he built up quite the rap sheet.
He sure did.
Mr. Albert Fish. As far as his victims are concerned, he actually did admit to I believe there was a psychiatrist who saw him once he was apprehended, so to speak. And I just want to get this right. Fish either confessed or was implicated in the molestation of over 400 children, the torture and disfigurement of approximately 100 victims, and the murder of at least 15 children over a 20-year period. Although he was only charged with 3, this was the outline, the overview of his damage, which is unreal.
And that's, I mean, what kind of human being could commit such acts that he did? And I think that's what makes this such a fascinating case to go over.
No, I agree. Ham and eggs.
They called him ham. So he was bullied.
They called him ham and eggs in school.
I'm sure that was
which led to his name change.
That was probably what led to all of it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So Hamilton then just became Albert Fish.
Dropped everything else
due to being bullied for his name Hamilton.
Yeah, he wanted to reinvent himself.
Right, when he sure did.
He definitely did. Excuse me. So yeah, I feel like that's pretty broad, right?
It's a good overview.
All right, so let's break it down.
Let's
talk about motive, right? The reason why he did what he did, essentially. What are you feeling? Like, what do you think?
Given his childhood and the history of mental illness, I do believe that control and the sadomasochism, along with obvious psychopathy, are sort of what drove him to commit the crimes that he did. As we know, he grew up in an orphanage.
He did.
And it was at that orphanage that unspeakable acts were performed on the boys there. They were beaten, punished daily. And Albert started to take a liking to those punishments and would be excited, turned on by them, both receiving and watching other children be punished and get beat. So there was something there that was triggered within him that I think would at least start his initial wrath, I guess, if you want to call it that.
The mayhem in which
the things that he went on to later do. Because a lot of what he did came back to essential punishments, pain, inflicting pain.
Right. So he quoted in saying, "I went there till I was nearly 9, and that's where I got started wrong."
There you go.
We were mercifully whipped. I saw boys doing many things they should not have done, is what he said. And there's actually a research paper that I found, very factual. I'll put it in the in the section description, just so I'll put the link in the description.
Okay.
But about the orphan life, and it said while in St. John's orphanage, Fish and other students were reportedly relentlessly abused by their teachers. It has been documented that the teacher would shred the children's clothes off, severely beat them, whip them, and exacerbate the experience by forcing other students to watch.
Wow.
So that was his experience there.
I think you can imagine, even without him being predisposed, I think any child in that position is going to be traumatized. I mean, that's traumatic, even in a healthy mind. So for somebody like Albert, that's a dangerous, dangerous beginning.
Well, yeah, because you think about it, he got dropped off there by his mom, right? She left him there because she felt as though she couldn't take care of him because she was dealing with her own things. Because there's some abandonment issues.
Absolutely.
Al, for sure. You know, the one person who's supposed to provide him with unconditional love, support, and warmth. You know, his rock, so to speak, is no longer in the picture, and he's 5 years old, and he's like, why? What's going on? So I can see how, you know, this manifestation, not that I'm condoning it by any means, but in his mind, I can see how the lack of control that he had led to him being excited and inflicting pain and having some grasp of control now, you know, as a young boy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, from, you know, being abandoned by, like you said, his mother, the one person in your life you're supposed to trust, to be there for you and take care of you, to be put into a situation at this orphanage where he could essentially trust nobody and had no control. You know, it sounds like there was no, you know, rhyme or reason as to what caused punishments, that they could probably do everything right and they'd still be abused. Now I wonder, as you're telling me that, if somehow that also is what drove his desire for children, because was there that child within him that somewhere subconsciously he was either trying to nurture at first and then also punishing because he felt like he wasn't wanted and he wasn't worthy of love. I mean, who knows?
You might be onto something. I think there's definitely some familiarity there, and you know, in his victimology and why he chose the individuals that he chose.
Right. I mean, with pedophilia, you know, that on top. I mean, that he's going to be after children anyway.
Right.
But the types of crimes that he committed against them does raise the question about how much of his own childhood contributed to that.
True. Clearly very impactful, that experience.
Yeah.
Eventually his mom does come to get him, but at that point he even admits the damage is done. Right. There's really no turning back from that, which leads down just a slew of things that he did. You know, he continued the molestation and the torturing that was involved as well as he got older, and his fixation with very odd, gratifying things that he felt was gratifying.
Well, he began engaging in prostitution.
Right.
And I have a feeling it wasn't so much about the money.
Oh, no, I don't believe it was.
Right.
I don't believe it was at all. I think the money was just an added bonus onto, you know, feeding his desires, his impulses, so to speak. But corporal aphasia, bad human feces that he would consume, drinking his own urine for arousal. I mean, these are things that clearly there's some mental illness going on there.
And that's not even, which I'm sure, obviously we'll get into with
Yeah.
the other forms of self-inflicted pain that he would administer to himself and obviously administer pain to others. So he gets out of the orphanage. He goes back with his mom as a teenager, young man. He starts prostituting himself. And at some point during that time in his young adulthood is when he began to lure children.
Yes.
To abuse
and
torture.
And he knew the victims to choose,
Mm-hmm.
too. He had they were either had some type of mental disability or they were a minority,
mm-hmm.
right? Because he felt as though people just wouldn't care that much, which, I mean, it's during the Great Depression, during that era. I mean,
it is what it
validity
is.
To
same thing with, being a prostitute. Oftentimes these serial killers will choose victims who they believe are just nameless, faceless. It's another way for them to dehumanize their victim.
Yeah, another sign of his organization right there.
Correct, yeah.
His mother actually arranges a marriage for him. So I looked this up and I used the article for this. Anne Mary Hoffman, he married first in 1898. So she was 19.
Mm-hmm. And he was 28?
8? Yes. I believe like 28. That sounds right. 28 years old. Yeah. So that was
We're not mathematicians, but it was
somehow
something.
She cranked out 6 children.
I mean, well, she was young and fertile.
Like, wow.
That was Anna Hoffman?
Yes.
Right?
I did look that up, yeah.
Interesting that it was an arranged marriage. That really stood out to me because there was nothing really culturally significant in his life as to how or why, and we don't have a whole lot of information about that either. So, but yeah, I thought that was interesting.
From what I've read, he seems like he would have been socially competent, sexually competent. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why. Well, here's the thing, though. I feel like he had a preference, but that preference wasn't really looked on in a great light.
So he had, which I think later on it became more obvious, but he did have some homosexual tendencies, mm-hmm. which at that time, that wasn't okay. It just wasn't accepted. Mm-hmm. And perhaps the arranged marriage was his mother's, way to have her son live a quote unquote normal lifestyle.
Yeah, it is normal.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So he's 6 children.
And he's married to Anne Mary Hoffman. She ends up leaving him in 1910. So they're married in 1898. She leaves him in 1910.
And we don't know what prompted that, right?
So apparently there was an in-house handyman who lived there. Yeah.
Who got a little too handy?
Okay. Maybe he got a handy as well.
I mean, that could have. Oh, Anna. I need a sip of water.
Oh, man. Those handies were all the rage back then.
Coincidentally, the hand on the cup.
There you go.
Anyway, that was a terrible joke. Okay.
So yeah, she leaves him. Very impactful moment. Another one.
Mm-hmm. Abandonment. Resurfaces again.
And I'm sure he probably felt as though, she wouldn't leave me. We have children. We have this life. But she left him with the children, and how he described it, took everything in the home.
That he actually came home to a living room with 0 furniture.
Correct.
And 6 children to raise. So, this man was a monster. There is no getting around it. He was evil to his core.
Yes.
But it's also hard not to sympathize, right? Everything else aside, him coming home from work or whatever to an empty house. His wife is gone. He has 6 children to raise. It's the Depression era. It's hard to make ends meet.
Right.
What are you going to do? And I could see that certainly just adding to the slow,
more fuel to that.
yeah,
to
internal.
That. Yeah. No, I agree. Definitely brings back more memories and issues of, like you said, that abandonment, right? I think that might have exacerbated a lot of his mental illness, that particular act in itself, that betrayal that he felt, and which led to, that pain, him wanting to feel pain, and the needles that he would stick in his pelvis, 29 of them.
Yes, and we'll put a picture.
Oh, yeah. We'll do some visual aids. Yeah, 29 needles he stuck in his pelvis. The nail-studded paddle that he would, which is just so sick, how he would have his children play a game in which they would use that on him.
While he essentially got off on it.
Yeah, fucking wild.
But then at some point too, it became like a self-flagellation because there was a level of religiosity that he developed. And we can go into that because in between this time, some more victims, obviously.
Well, yeah, he's still torturing and sexually assaulting children, and this is all still going on around.
Within a very, in the grand scheme of things, it was a small time frame.
Right. No, it was. It was. He only lived up to be 66 years, but still, there was a lot that happened.
And so part of the reason he became a house painter was he did it partly for the purpose of finding more victims and being able to travel and make it easier to find victims without getting caught. Which
goes into our means
category.
The ability to commit the crime. Like you said, the house painter, perfect. That's perfect, right? You can even scout locations, what's empty, what's not, what's convenient. Again, that organized thinking, right? Also, I know he had a particular victimology, right? He chose children, but I feel like it kind of worked out because he was physically bigger than them.
Right.
He could manipulate them, as the adult. He came off as unsuspecting and unassuming. He had people. He was charming and charismatic. People. He
looked like a grandfather.
He did.
He really did, an innocent grandfather, and that's where one of the victim that he actually was convicted on met her fate.
Grace Budd, which was his. I want to say See, I don't know if it was his last victim ever, but I know that's the last one as far as what we have. That
they were able to track him down.
Right.
That's what they caught. They were able to catch him because that became such a high profile case.
It did.
And incredibly disturbing.
Yeah, there's a letter that he wrote the family, which was sick in itself. I don't know if you want to.
I will give it my best to
give it a go.
To read this letter. It is very, very disturbing, but I also think it really gives you some insight, I think, into his way of thinking, and just how sick this man really was. So he sent this letter to this child's mother. And he starts by saying, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma, Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco for Hong Kong, China. On arriving, there and two others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At that time, there was famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 were sold for food in order to keep others from starving. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go in any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out and just what you wanted cut from it. A boy or girl's behind, which is the sweetest part of the body and sold as veal cutlet, brought the highest price. John said there was so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to New York, he stole 2 boys, one 7, one 11, took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had. Several times every day and night he spanked them, tortured them to make their meat good and tender. First, he killed the 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest ass and, of course, the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten except the head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven, all of his ass, oiled, broiled, fried, and stewed. The little boy was next, went the same way. At that time, I was living at 409 East 100th Street, near Right Side. He told me so often how good human flesh was, I made up my mind to taste it. On Sunday, June 3rd, 1928, I called you at 406 West 15th Street, brought you pot cheese, strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her. On the pretense of taking her to a party, you said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run down the stairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was. I can't.
Yeah, it's...
I can't. I'm sorry. I can't do it.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm going to try to find where you...
It's so disturbing. I didn't realize how difficult it would be to like read it out loud.
No, you're good.
I really hope I didn't mess that up.
No, you're fine because it's intense. It's a lot. It's horrible. It's awful.
Here, do you want...
You left off. Where'd you leave off? I have it pulled up here. I just want to make sure.
Are you on the same... Is it Crime Library?
No.
Okay.
What paragraph?
Here.
I was gonna say because I have both letters.
It's the last one, and then you just have to go and click next page, I think, on it. After that last paragraph.
The first I strapped her. Is that where you stopped?
Choked her, and he talked about her sweet.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, here. Yeah. First I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death. Then cut her into small pieces so I can take my meat to my rooms. Cooked and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her, though I could had, if I wished. She died a virgin.
Can you even imagine how terrified this poor little girl was? And I mean, I don't even...
I know, just to
but then,
that.
Yeah, for him to try to justify, and that's the part that really gets me, that he was almost proud to say she died a virgin, right? And mind you, this is a letter that he wrote to her mother.
Yes.
Who had been searching for her child, having no idea, sleepless nights. The whole town was looking for her. Nobody knew what happened. She trusted this man to take her daughter to a party.
He did. She did.
And she never came home.
Was,
and then she gets this letter.
Yeah. He was that convincing.
Mm-hmm.
He clearly did that not for the family to have any type of closure.
No.
That was all for him.
He took pride in it.
You can definitely tell.
Absolutely.
Just in how thorough he was.
Right.
In writing that, how he took pride in what he did. And especially the fact that he didn't, sexually assault her, so to speak.
That somehow that should bring some sort of peace to her parents. I really don't know. But again, I don't think any of us can really fully try to wrap our heads around what these people are thinking or feeling, because most people don't think or feel that way.
No,
we all have our dark moments, right? We have dark thoughts, and I think most people can be driven to do some really ugly things, but this takes it to a level that is so beyond comprehension.
Right.
So yeah,
the cannibalism is interesting in that for a lot of serial killers, the act in itself is all powerful, meaning that they've done something, or they're doing something very few people have. Right? They're removing flesh from bone. That makes them feel good. They feel like they're in an entire league all by themselves. So that's that rush and that thrill of knowing that.
And that their victim is a part of them now.
Yes, that victim is a part of them.
They feel as if they are now forever with them, that they succeeded in getting their victim, and they succeeded in keeping their victim
essentially
forever, as long as they live.
A trophy, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Their blood mixes together. They become part of.
They're one now.
They're one now, right?
Yeah.
It's so sick.
It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that constant need for that, like that doesn't stop. That when they eat their victims, it gives them a sense of control. It gets them that control back. It gets them that sense of calm in their life, and that feeling, that emotion, like they want to keep feeling that, so they keep repeating.
Right. It's like a drug addict. It's a high. They're getting that rush.
Yep.
And he definitely, that rush for him came from pain.
Yes.
Giving pain, inflicting pain. And, giving himself pain, inflicting pain on himself. And it was interesting. His son, right? Albert Jr.
Right.
Had talked about him later in life as an adult, and would talk about some of the weird things that he experienced with his father, even abusive type things, by having to spank him with the paddle that had the nails in it. He said that they had gone on a weekend trip with the family, and he found his father at the top of a mountain screaming, "I am God, I am God," over and over and over and over again at the top of his lungs. And mind you, he's got 6 children with him that have no idea what's going on. Had to be really terrifying for those children. I can imagine.
Good old Al. So there's another note, or another letter, for another victim. I believe it was his second victim, actually, Billy Gaffney, 4 years old.
And he was convicted on Billy as well, right? I believe.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, we know of Francis McDonald, Billy Gaffney, and Grace Budd.
Right.
Other 3 people he actually, spoke of. But there's another letter about Billy Gaffney that is also just very intense. So I'll try to give that a read here.
Yeah, please do, because I can't. So.
I brought him to the Riker Avenue dumps. There is a house that stands alone not far from where I took him. I took the boy there, stripped him naked, tied his hands and feet, and gagged him with a piece of dirty rag I picked out of the dump. Then I burned his clothes, threw his shoes in the dump. Then I walked back and took the trolley to the 59th Street at 2 a.m. and walked from there home. So we left him, Billy Gaffney, overnight, and he went home.
4-year-old little boy.
Yes, 4 years old.
Alone.
The next day, about 2 p.m., I took tools, a good heavy Cat 9 tails, homemade, short handle, cut one of my belts in half, slit the halves in 6 straps about 8 inches long. It's very thorough about what he did. I think he relished in writing this as well.
Absolutely. He sounds like he's very satisfied with himself.
I whipped his bare behind till the blood ran from his legs. I cut off his ears, nose, slit his mouth from ear to ear, gouged out his eyes. He was dead then. I stuck the knife in his belly and held my mouth to his body and drank his blood. I picked up 4 old potato sacks and gathered a pile of stones. Then I cut him up. I had a grip with me. I put his nose, ears, and a few slices of his belly in the grip. Then I cut him through the middle of his body, just below the belly button. Then through his legs about 2 inches below his behind. This is like insane.
It's making my stomach turn.
That's like someone wanted to do this
and then relive it. Also, I mean,
well, that's the gratifying part of this, right? Now
and share it with the world.
He gets to relive it, that sensation over now, just by. I had the front of his body I liked best. His monkey and Pee-wee's.
Okay. And a nice, it's not funny. It's
not. I'm just like, what? His monkeys and Pee-wees and a nice little fat behind to roast in the oven and eat. I made a stew out of his ears. He's like writing this is ingredients, this is cookbook.
Just.
I made a stew out of his ears, nose, pieces of his face and belly. I put onions, carrots, scallops. No, he didn't say scallops. I put onions, carrots, turnips, celery, salt, and pepper. He wants to make a proper stew, you know.
Jesus.
It was good. Then I split the cheeks, and I'm like, I have to like add some levity here because this is just too much.
Yeah, I need you're gonna need to edit out the laughing for me because I feel like a terrible human being right now.
Then I split the cheeks of his behind open. Oh, I read that. Did I read that already? I split the cheeks.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I put strips of bacon on each cheek of his behind and put them in the oven. Then I picked 4 onions, and when the meat had roasted about 1/4 hour, I poured about a pint of water over it for gravy and put in the onions. At frequent intervals, I basted his behind with a wooden spoon so the meat would be nice and juicy. In about 2 hours, it was nice and browned, cooked through. I never ate any roasted turkey that tasted half as good as his sweet, fat little behind.
Oh my God.
I ate every bit of that meat in about 4 days. His little monkey was as sweet as a nut, but his Pee-wees I could not chew. Threw them in the toilet.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank God that's done. Yeah, that's again, organizational thinking here, very planned out, very methodical, very strategic in how he did things, which kind of contrasts with his supposed, right? He said that God told him that he needed to do these things.
Right.
Right. He heard a voice from God. A visionary killer is what they're called. When they feel like they have to act on behalf of God or some other dissociative voice. Right. And God told him to do this, to commit these horrendous these acts, which I find, I don't know, like, I don't believe it.
I was just,
I don't know if I believe it.
Just going to ask, do you think that, I mean, I don't doubt at all that people do have auditory hallucinations.
Oh, no. Yeah.
People hear voices. But for somebody like Fish, is this a way for him to justify? I mean, is he believing it himself? Did he actually hear these voices? Or is this something that he just kind of felt driven to do, and then he just attributed that drive to being the voice of God instead, to sort of separate himself from having the responsibility of that being his own desire?
I don't think there was any separation. I think this was all Albert Fish.
Well, and he thought he was God too.
I think this is what he wanted to do. I think that he was what the FBI would classify as an organized killer. He was very intelligent, very methodical, planned a lot of his things, took weapons with him. He even had his, what did he call them? His weapons of, but he had a set of weapons.
Yeah, he kept it with him. And in fact,
meat cleaver, butcher's knife, handsaw, his implements of God.
I think it was Billy. They were on a bus on their way for Billy's fate to be sealed, unbeknownst to him. They went to get off the bus, and Albert left his bag of weapons.
Right.
And Billy said,
was that Billy or Grace?
I think it was Billy.
Okay.
And Billy said, "Sir, you forgot your stuff." And he kept tugging on him. And it seemed as if Fish sort of blamed Billy. Like, had he not reminded me, he'd still be alive.
Right.
Or maybe it was Grace. She would have come home from the party. I can't, now I don't recall. But one of the children.
He did, yeah. That's what happened.
Reminded him that he forgot his tools that he was going to use to kill them. But they were just so innocent, trying to be helpful. And he sort of blamed them for reminding him to go back and get them.
Which is absurd.
And he felt that it was fate, right? That he was able to catch the bus driver, to stop and get back on the bus, and his tools were still sitting right there where he left them. So it must have been his destiny to do what he did.
I think that he definitely used religion as a cover to... So here's the thing. A lot of organized killers, they're like so intelligent that they want to sound, they can come off as insane if they're caught, right? They know all the things to say, they know all the things to do. I think that he just tried to play like, oh, I heard from God, and God told me to do this, and God told me to do that. I don't know, like, usually when someone, again, they didn't have the term schizophrenia, but he had the symptoms or a lot of the things,
right?
So to speak, the hallucinations, the delusions, things like that. Their brains, they're like so chaotic a lot of the times. Like, a lot of their killings they're really blitzed, right? The crime scenes are chaotic. They don't really try to hide the body. They certainly don't make recipes out of their meat. Right. And I know everyone's different, but for the most part, people with schizophrenia, and we're going to talk about one, Chase.
Stay tuned for that one.
Which I believe he actually did based on his killings, where the victims were found. You know what, how he chose to do what he did. You know, unlike Albert here, who from jump he just knew what to do. You know,
he seemed like he was very much able to control his impulses.
He's like, I'm an old man. I can use that to my advantage. I'm unassuming. I'm unsuspecting.
Which is terrifying. I think that's almost probably, it's one of the most scary types of serial killers, is because they could be anybody and they are so difficult to catch.
Which opportunity, right? Coincides with opportunity. Like I said, unsuspecting. You mentioned that he was a house painter, so he had access to different locations. He would even put newspaper ads in to try to select his victims, to have the boys, or even look at ads to try to, you know, find victims as well.
And didn't he try to date? It wasn't like missed connections. It was like a love letter exchange in the paper.
Yes.
And that almost seemed that it was another way. He just got off on going into explicit detail of pain.
Yeah.
Which was so disturbing, because he found some women that played into it and agreed to play along. Albert Fish. So brings the do you think he is the perfect storm of nature and nurture? Do you think one supersedes the other? Or he was just destined to always be this way?
I feel like I think the perfect storm. I think it was definitely nature and nurture that played a huge role in his, the actions he took in his life.
Yeah.
His family, like I said, already, there was mental illness there.
Yeah.
There was a predisposition. So, and I feel like the trauma and the things that he went through just exacerbated those, what was going on, what he already had in him. And I don't know,
opportunity. I think that played a very large role in it.
He was just too methodical. For me to think anything less, Maybe he was, an exception, maybe he did have schizophrenia, but he could still function.
Well, I mean, clearly they found him mentally fit to stand trial.
They did. They did.
And he was ultimately convicted and sentenced to die by execution.
Yeah.
And he did. January 16, 1936.
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I think that I agree in a way it was the perfect storm, but I tend to lead more, especially in his case, that he was never going to have a happy life. Something was bound to happen. There was just too many factors. Granted, most of them were environmental, but a lot of them contributed to the natural development of his brain, right? And so, that still kind of goes into that nature portion of it. And given that he was so young, even if he had just been abandoned, right, at the orphanage and experienced that, and that's where it ended, something tells me that something else would have happened, whether it just be petty crimes, not being able to hold a job, but his intellect too. I mean, that's a huge part of it, and that's just something that he was born with. He was born with a very intellectual type of mind.
Yes.
But, he was found fit to stand trial. I don't think that he was crazy. I mean, he was crazy, right? But I think he fits the true definition of a psychopath. He
100%. 100%.
just justified his behavior. He was able to live, right?
Yeah.
Each and every day, and
Yeah.
he raised 6 kids. I'm just not sure that he ever had a chance. I think one way or another,
It was just bound to.
his bloodline, like something would have surfaced and caused some sort of a disruption in his life.
I'd get on board. I can get on board with that.
But there was a lot of opportunity.
There was a lot of opportunity. He was smart.
He was smart.
He was clever.
The occupation he chose, the fact that his wife left him, he had to work. It was the Depression. They didn't have money, so it's not like he could stay home. So it was understandable that he wasn't there with his kids and that he was traveling to earn money.
Yeah.
His, desire for children, the pedophilia aspect of it, his victims were always going to be vulnerable, unwitting, just,
much like he was.
naive.
Much like when he was young and vulnerable.
Yeah. Be interesting to find out how some of the other children at that orphanage turned out.
That would be interesting. Yeah. Like how they adjusted.
Right.
After.
Because as we've talked about, not everybody that suffered trauma becomes a cannibalistic serial killer.
They do not.
Right? I mean, which is part of the, a reason that we're so drawn to researching this is because you can actually thrive and become a very successful, if not more successful, human being, right? After having gone through something traumatic. So it's really fascinating as to, what happens along the lines for things to short circuit.
That's a good question.
It is.
That's a good question.
And with that,
Albert Fish.
Albert Fish.
All right. Well, we thank you guys for tuning in. We do ask that you smash that like button, subscribe, leave us a comment, let us know what you think about Albert Fish. If you have any thoughts or opinions, hit that bell for notifications, share this video out there, and you guys take care.
Good night.